I was a horrible leader when I started. I was a very good technical person, but once I finally got promoted into leadership, I was horrible. I was horrible. Because what happened to me is probably what happened to a lot of technical people out there. I was a very good technical person. I worked the most hours. I billed the most of the clients. I took pride in my coding. I studied. I did all these things to be a great coder. And so often what they do is when you have a team of coders and you need a leader, you take the best one and you make them a leader. And that's what happened to me. But then I found out all the things that made me a great technical person, 0 of them translated into leadership ability. I was analytical, hardworking over here, but when I got to leadership, it's like, oh my gosh, how do I motivate a team? How do I communicate and really have the respect of my people? Because the people that I was all of a sudden in charge of, they used to be my friends. We used to go to coffee together. We used to have beers together. We used to go to lunch together. We used to always complain about management and leadership, right? Oh, they should be doing this. They should be doing that. They should be doing this. And all of a sudden then, here I'm a leader, and I'm the person that they're probably at lunch or having a beer talking about. And it was very, very difficult. And I also realized at that point that my whole career is going to be advanced by one thing from here on in, and that's my leadership ability. So I knew that what I'm going to have to do is get my leadership ability up to where my technology ability is. And so literally I spent the next few years working on my leadership ability and working on myself to become a better leader. And it was a lot of hours, a lot of frustrations, some wins, a lot of failures. But what I'm here to do today is to tell you what I wish I knew as that young technical person in their first leadership position. Because with all this studying, I think I got a pretty good, I started to get it. After a couple of years, I mentioned I started to get it. And I went from a not effective leader. I started getting up to an okay leader, to a good leader, and to what I believe now I'm a very good leader. In fact, after a while, I got promoted. Then I was promoted. I was moved to London, then Copenhagen as a director in the international division of the large software company I was with. Then they moved me to Singapore. I was in charge of Southeast Asia. And then I moved back to California, and I started. Then I really fulfilled my dream of owning my own software company. So I ended up starting 3 software companies. I sold 2 of them. I acquired 1 of them. And after I got done with that, I wanted to give back, and I wanted to start teaching people, especially technical people, what I learned, because it was a very, very hard, long road for me. And so I became a leadership speaker. And right now what I do is I'm an international leadership keynote speaker, author, and trainer. And I have 2 best-selling books. I write for Entrepreneur.com, and I used to have a radio show. And it's a unique type of leadership because you can be a real jerk and be a real effective leader. But that's not what I wanted to be. And that's not what I teach people. I really believe that being a leader, you can affect the most change in this world. I mean, it used to be politicians and activists, but now it's the business people that have the most influence in the world. And I think that when you do that, taking a humanistic view, taking a positive view of what you're doing as a leader, the people in your team, your customers, even the community that supports you, I think you can bring so much as a leader and bring so much positivity and really build something of meaning for not just for you, but everybody around you. That's the type of leadership that I teach. It's a very unique type. I'm the only person that teaches it in the world. And to me, that's my new mission in life. It's like your life has phases. My life was a technical person, was a software leader, and now it's to give back and to teach other people some of the things that took me so long to learn. So that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about tonight. Does that sound good? Yeah. Okay, good. If you said no, I don't know what we talk about for the next hour, so we're on a good side. But we're here in Split, Croatia. I do have Croatian ancestors, and I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I was a real nerd when I grew up. I mean, it used to be when I was I'm 48 now, and so this is in the 80s, and I was so nerdy that in high school, me and my friends, we would all have desktop PCs and play all the video games on our PCs, and our idea of a good time was going out and buying the new RAM or the new video card to put in our computers so that we'd soup them up and play the new video games a little faster. Needless to say, I didn't have a lot of sex in high school. Yes, it's crazy. A little bit. I'm married now, so I changed a little bit, I guess. And then I was in Pittsburgh, and I graduated. I got my MBA, and I'm all ready to hit the streets, to be this big corporate executive. And the only job I could get is what I call an IT foot soldier. So it was for this large engineering firm, and if your printer broke, you would call somebody. That somebody would be me. I would come and I would crawl under the desk to see which cord is undone. And I'll tell you, at 2 meters 3 or 6'8", that's a really ugly scene right there. So I'm like, I was working a ton of hours, not making any money. So my cousin lived in San Diego, and he's like, Michael, and this is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so he said, Mike, if you're going to have a crappy job, why not have a crappy job in San Diego? I said, that's really good logic. So I drove across the states. When I got to San Diego, I knew, so that was my sort of system integration experience, but I knew I wanted to work now in software. So when I got to San Diego, I took the Yellow Pages. You guys have Yellow Pages here? You know what they mean. There's a big catalog of all the businesses around, and I opened the section to where it said computer software, and I faxed my resume to all software companies in the Yellow Pages. Now, if you're under 35, you probably don't understand what faxed my resume to people in the Yellow Pages. That means it's like I Snapchatted my LinkedIn profile to everybody on Google. That's like a little translation of fax my resume. So, and I followed it up with a phone call, and to be honest with you, some guy said, I followed up with a phone call. I said, hey, I faxed my resume over. Can you give me a job? And some guy says, anybody with enough guts to do what you did, I'll give him a job. So that's how I got started in computer software. And again, I started as this programmer. We got acquired by this large international company. I learned a lot there. That's when they moved me around the world. I came back to San Diego and I started my own company. And again, I really didn't get leadership then. And when I started the company, it was a good idea, and there was a market gap at the time. So we got to be pretty big pretty quick, based on basically my charisma, my willpower, and my technical ability. And what had happened is, when I got there, I needed more people, so I started hiring my friends in. And so my friends got in, and we started working, and then we got to this point where my leadership flaws started to be exposed. Because I think as technical people, we can put a lot on our back. We can micromanage, we can take things off other people's plate, but that only works so long. It's like, but then the dam breaks. It's too much. We try to take on too much ourselves because we're not delegating, we're not motivating our team, we're not getting them engaged. And that's what started to happen. It started to implode. We lost a big client. One of my friends quit. One of my good friends quit. He's like, this isn't fun. I'm like, well, what do you mean fun? I didn't even understand. And it's not that the work should be fun, but it's like they said, you don't have a good culture here. And I never even thought about a culture. What is the culture? I mean, if you're a boss, what is the culture? If you're a leader, what is the culture of your team or whoever you're leading? That's up to you as the boss or the leader or the manager, whoever it is, to really institute it. And I wasn't even thinking of that. I didn't even know what is our culture, and that's a bad answer if your leader doesn't know what your culture is or what they're trying to do. There was all these things that I've never dealt with. For example, my marketing woman and my main sales guy, they were in the same office together, and one day my marketing lady came and said, hey, I want to file a human resources complaint. The salesperson said something sexual to me, and I want to file a formal complaint. I was like, holy cow, what do I do? What do you do? I mean, it's like all these things started hitting me that all of a sudden I had to handle as a leader. And then the worst thing happened. I had a business partner. After I started the company, I gave him a small part of the business, a small ownership percentage, and we really started butting heads. I mean, we were growing really quickly. There was a lot of stress around. And a long story short is, this is one of the craziest thing that's ever happened to me. We were in an argument, and he physically assaulted me in our own office. He started a fight with me in our own office. And so I had to the next day at work, I had to have armed guards and a restraining order so he didn't come in. I had to tell all the employees this guy who was working in my company, who was an executive in my company, was no longer allowed in. And why? He started a competing firm. He started stealing people and customers. And I went into a depression. It was the hardest time I ever went through in my life. And with difficult times, it was I didn't even want to get out of bed every day. And I started thinking, it's like, do I want to sell the company? Look, I'm taking on all this stress, and it's not enjoyable at all. There's not 1 ounce of fun. There's no enjoyment in this. And I was thinking, man, do I want to maybe I'm not meant to be a leader. Maybe I'm just meant to be a good technical guy. Maybe I should sell the company. Maybe I should go back to being a coder, a really good coder. But I'm like, no, this has always been my dream, is to own a business. And I'm like, look, I've done the hard part. I've started the business. Now I just got to figure out how to be a leader. And I told myself, look, I'm going to suck it up for the next couple of months, because we were in a couple of lawsuits. I sued him, he sued me, and vice versa, over and over. And those couple of months were the hardest I ever went through, but I knew it was going to be better on the other side. And so I powered through that. And then I made another there was another thing that really, really changed my life. And because I was still under a lot of stress, I felt like there was something missing in life, because I'm waiting for I had these goals, and it was interesting, because I started to reach these goals. I want to make so much money, I want to have a company so big, and I was reaching them, but I wasn't happy, I wasn't fulfilled. And so I met a couple business owners. They really had this calm aura about them. They really seemed like they had something figured out, something that I didn't have figured out. And it turns out they all earned a master's degree in spiritual psychology from this place called University of Santa Monica in Los Angeles, so a 2-hour drive from San Diego from where I was. And I'm like, look, I'm going to give it a try. So I went and I earned this really unique master's in spiritual psychology. And I want to give everybody here a little taste of what spiritual psychology is. So for the next 45 minutes, we're going to meditate and hug. No, I'm just joking. It's more fun to do that in Germany, because the Germans like nine hugging. It's really good. No, what spiritual psychology is nothing to do with religion, but it is psychology. We take the assumption, though, that we're all loving, caring beings. So we have the assumption that this is your person. This is your soul, if you choose to have a soul, and that's loving. You're a loving being. And if there's anything we have that's not loving in our life, that's because we have psychological unresolved issues. If we get jealous or we get angry, which is okay, we're all humans. We use psychology to clear that up. We use psychology, the same psychoanalysis techniques you would learn anywhere else. We just use that in service to getting to our core, our authentic self, or our soul, if you choose to believe we have a soul. And so, and that was great for me on the personal level. And then when I started applying what I learned at this spiritual psychology course to my businesses, then my businesses started to thrive. I mean, we were the #1 best place to work in San Diego. I was Social Entrepreneur of the Year, and we were listed on the Inc. 5000 list a couple years in a row. And that was on the outside, but on the inside, it's like I was finally having fun. I was finally enjoying my work. Because I think we all want to do well at work. I think no matter who you get, deep down, you want to contribute to an organization and to what somebody's doing. And B, I think, especially the people that are entrepreneurs and have entrepreneurial spirit, we want to build something, but I like to make money. I'm not going to lie to you. I like to make money. Making money is okay. But I want to make money, but I also want to make a good environment for my employees. I want to make great relationships with my customers. I want to give back to the community that I come out of. I want it to be really holistic. And I think everybody wants to do that. We just don't know how. And so I really came up with this leadership method to do that. And I came up with it for myself, and I implemented it in my businesses. But then my friends in San Diego, they were like, oh my gosh, what are you doing over there? They saw the success I was having. So I started helping and coaching them. And I realized that 18 years in enterprise software was okay, but now it's time for me to change. It treated me well, but now I really enjoy the coaching and the teaching. So I sold off my software companies, and now that's what I do. I go around the world teaching this uplifting, empowering, elevating type of leadership to leaders throughout the world. Because again, I think when you have a leader that's really coming with this positivity and this optimism and this power, because there's real power in that, then they affect so many more people. All the people that work for them, all their vendors, all their customers, all the relationships. Because as we all know with an organization, how the leader shows up is how everybody else shows up in the organization. And it's interesting because a lot of what I teach is based on emotional intelligence. It's based on psychology, and I throw a little bit of general spirituality in there. But what I do, there's a thing in psychology called projections. A thing in psychology called a projection. And what that means is the way I view everything else is really a reflection of the relationship with myself. And what I really do is I help people work on the relationships with themselves, because I believe that all of us have a natural leader within us. But it's really hard to show up in that natural leader, especially when you're early on in your leadership career, because being a leader is tough. I mean, think about the whole nature of leadership. The whole nature of leadership is I have this kind of responsibility and I do these tasks. And then you work really hard to get promoted. Or you start your own business. Then you have a lot more responsibility in different tasks. And people are watching you, it seems like with a microscope. You know, they see each and every move that you do. And normally you're not given the training or the support or the background or whatever you need to be the successful leader. Because rarely do we train on leadership, and rarely do we have good coaching and mentoring and leadership. And the difference between, like, for example, coding and leadership is there's no flow chart to follow. There's not like, hey, when your marketing lady comes in and says this about your sales guy, ask her this, if this, then this. There's none of that for leadership. It's a total different thing. And so bad leadership comes from insecurity. Bad leadership comes from insecurity. So there's these leaders that aren't comfortable with themselves, and it's so common because once you're in your first leadership position, you're like, oh my gosh, I get this responsibility. I don't want to make a mistake. So I'm not going to admit to anybody that I don't know what I'm doing. And then what happens is it's like part of you feels like a fraud because you don't ever want to admit that you don't know what you're doing, but then you just try to keep everything moving the best you can. But then you get more and more stuff piled on you and you feel more and more like a fraud. And if you don't think this is true, if you think somehow, someday you're going to get to a level where you're running such a big business or such a big team, you're not going to feel like a fraud, that's not true. There's a group called YPO. I was facilitating a YPO retreat with 8 business owners. 2 of them ran businesses of $2 billion or more. $2 billion or more, and one of them started it from scratch. And we did this exercise where we talk about, are you worthy of this success, or do you feel like a fraud? Do you feel like part of you didn't deserve it or don't deserve it? All of them felt like a fraud, including 2 guys that ran businesses that are doing over $2 billion a year. $2 billion a year. And so there's this fear. What this fear does is this fear takes us away from being authentic, takes us away from being transparent, takes us away from really connecting to people. And I think that's where, as a leader, you really need to connect to people. And so that's why we work on the relationship with ourselves, because when we can come in and be that powerful leader and take control, because look, people want to be led. People want to be led. Like if we had all you guys come here for this event, and Tony sort of said, all right, well, when you guys are ready, we'll start. And I said, well, what do you guys want to talk about? Look, we would get nowhere, right? You come here for a thing. You come here because Tony is the leader. Tony set this up, and Tony sets the stage, and he sets the expectations. And then I come and I deliver what he brought me in to deliver. It's like this contract. But I see so many people when they get into these leadership abilities, because if you have a team, they're ready. They're looking for your vision. They're looking for a direction. And that's what you're there to provide. You can get collaboration. You can get consensus on how to get there. But it's up to you to provide that vision of what things look like or what direction you're going in. I see so many people when there's a meeting starting and they're in charge of the meeting, they're like, okay, everybody, when you're ready, we'll start. No, you're the leader. It's up to you to get everybody ready and started on time. On time. Let me ask for questions right now. I'd love this to be interactive. Peter knows me. I could talk for hours, right? But I want to make sure that I want to make this as practical as you can. So, who here is a technical person or started as a technical person? Coding, project management, whatever it is. Who here currently leads a team? Leads a team. Halfway, half a team. Who here ever wants to own a business? Ever wants to own a business? All right. Who here owns a business? That's good. That's good. I'll talk about 1 or 2 skills, but before that, anybody want to ask any questions? Anybody want to cover anything specific? Yes. Is it better to fake it till you make it? It depends on, the question is, isn't it better to fake it till you make it? Yes and no. there's a time to fake it and a time not to fake it. So we talk about authenticity and vulnerability. So let's start with vulnerability. Kako se kaže vulnerability? What's the Croatian word for vulnerability? Ranjivost. Okay, vulnerability. When I first got into leadership, I thought I could never let anybody know that I didn't know what I was doing. I was scared to show any type of weakness. But if you've ever seen the type of person, and you might see this with politicians, you might see it with business people, you might see it with speakers, if they go up and they tell you all about how awesome they are, you'd be like, oh, this person did a lot in their life, but I don't feel connected to them. Intimacy and connection come from vulnerability. That's why I started. What's the first thing that I told you in this speech? I was a horrible leader. And by saying that, it makes it okay if you've had leadership challenges. I say that because that's honest. I was not very good when I started. And I want to let you know, if you have some doubts about different areas, that's okay. That's normal. Nobody gets into leadership and knows everything they're doing. It's by definition, you're always put in these new positions. But there's a way to be vulnerable. There's a healthy way to be vulnerable and an unhealthy way to be vulnerable. For example, I was working with this one CEO, and his organization had 10 straight years of growth. It was an e-commerce company, 10 straight years of growth. And they would be growing every year, hiring people all the time, opening up new locations. But then the industry, it hit a downturn. All of a sudden, things started to change. And he was having an all-hands meeting, which means all the employees, he was addressing all his couple hundred employees. And I said, so, what's going on in your business right now? I was helping him, do his speech to all his employees. I said, so what's going on in the business right now? He's like, well, the economy turned, things, we're having a cash flow crunch. It's different. We haven't had to do this all in the last 10 years, but I really have to, start, cutting back in different areas. I said, okay, well, what are you going to talk about during the all hands meeting, the employee meeting? He's going to say, well, I'm going to tell everybody everything's great. I said, well, things aren't great. Do they know they're not great? They're like, yeah, they probably do. They know what's happening to our competitors. They read the newspapers. I mean, it's not a secret what's happening. And I said, well, what do you think is going to happen when you tell them everything's great, but they know it's not great? He said, phew. They're probably not going to trust me. They're probably not going to believe another word that I say the whole meeting. I said, yeah, that's what I do. And I'd say, what else? He said, well, they're probably going to start looking for other jobs because they think something really horrible is going to come. So yeah, they probably will start doing that. And he said, well, what do you think I should do? I think, well, you should be honest with them, but be honest with them in the right way. And so what we did is we worked together, and when the all-hands meeting came, he said, look, everybody, it's been an amazing 10 years of growth. He said, look, I think you guys all know what's happening. The economy's on a downturn, especially our sector, our industry. So we're really going to have to make some changes. We're really going to have to make some changes. It's going to be a tough next quarter, maybe a tough next year. And he said, this is coming, so I want to give everybody a heads up. He said, look, my goal is to get through this tough time without laying anybody off. And to be honest, I can't even promise that. But that's my goal. And so I want to know what we can do as an organization to get through that. And he said it was amazing because it's like the whole energy of the whole room changed. Because he addressed, we call it in English, he addressed the elephant in the room. It's like there was this issue nobody wanted to talk about, but he had the courage to go and put it on the table. But once he put it on the table, everybody breathed that sigh of relief. Oh, great, he's talking about it. And once he started talking about it, he said, look, this is what my intention is. He said, and then he put it up to the collaboration. He said, here's what my vision is, here's what my goal is. We're in this together. What can we all do? He said it was amazing because everybody started rallying around. He said, the accounting department said, hey, we were supposed to get new computers this year. We don't have to do them. We can make do with the other couple years, so we can save that budget item. Some other people said, there was a lady in shipping. She's like, I want to spend more time with my son, so I'll go from 40 hours a week to 20 hours a week, and I'll take a reduced paycheck. So all over the organization, people started seeing what they can do or their division can do to really come together at this. And what happened is they made it through the downturn without laying anybody off. And in fact, they picked up 2 competitors because they handled it so well. So you see, it's okay to be vulnerable, but you never just want to throw up all your problems over everybody. It's okay to acknowledge things that you don't know something. It's okay to acknowledge that there's going to be a problem. It's okay to acknowledge that there's going to be, a lawsuit, a pissed off client, or whatever it is. But as a leader, when you put out anything like that, you want to make sure you are leading the charge to get through it. So don't pretend they don't exist, but it's your responsibility to make sure that the path forward is clear. That's what they call it. I talk about vision and direction as a leader. And also what they talk about as the leadership mindset of really of owning that you're the leader. So many people in technology, they think a leader is a bad word. They think leader is a bad word. I never want to be a manager. I never want to be a leader. Well, leader is part of career progression, and great leadership is amazing to watch. I mean, if you've ever worked for a great leader, it's so invigorating, so fun. Thank you for the question. Any other questions as we go through? Yes.
One question. You said that we are all loving people, and because you don't feel like that, we have some unresolved issues. So, what are some starting points if we feel like we have some unresolved issues to pinpoint them? Do we find some third-party help, or we do it ourselves? Are there any some below you?
Well, I'll always give you a hug, my man, but you're way back there, so we can save it till later. His question is, if you have some behaviors that aren't loving, what's a quick trick you can do about it, right? So I'll give you a little bit of psychology here, and I'll give you a lot in a little time. Is that okay? So when it comes to negative emotions, first of all, we're human, so it's okay to have negative emotions. But if you can admit that you're having a negative emotion and tell yourself it's okay to have that, the emotion will wash through you. So for example, if I'm sad, again, it's okay to have sad. Don't get too caught up on the psychological unresolved issues. If I get sad, something happens, something happens to one of my pets, something happens to one of my friends, and I get sad, and I tell myself, literally the internal chatter is, hey, I'm sad, and it's okay to be sad right now. The sadness will wash through. They say negative emotions get caught on the resistance. It's like, I'm sad, I don't want to be sad, I shouldn't be sad. That's what's going to hold the emotion there for you. So if you can be, the more okay you are with the emotion, the quicker it runs through you. Make sense? Yes. There's a great book called Letting Go. It's simple as that. A guy wrote a book all about the psychology of letting these emotions go through accepting them. Cool, helpful? Good. What else we got?
Yeah. What kind of leader are you? How would you describe yourself?
So I'm a visionary leader. So what happens to me, and this is really interesting, there's different ways to segment leaders. To me, there's visionary or collaborative. I get in my head these really clear visions of what I want. Like, a software product, I want to do this. And I get these visions, and it's and I think artists get the same thing. I think artists get like a vision for a paint, for something they're painting or a sculpture, and it's like really painful until I can really work on that. And it's hard because when I have employees or my team members, I have to really slow down and explain to them the whole vision that I'm getting in my head to make it a reality. The other type of leaders, I believe, are collaborative leaders. And these are the people that want to join a group. They want to be part of, I have some friends, I have one buddy, he's in real estate, and he always has partners. I've done partners. I don't do well with partners because when I get a vision, it's hard to let somebody else into my vision equally. You know what I mean? It's like, Steve Jobs is a good example of somebody who has such a clear vision and everything he does is to move him through a vision. I would hate to be partnered with Steve Jobs, right? But there's other people out there where they don't really get their own vision. When they get with another person, maybe they know marketing and they get with a technical person. Maybe they, really play off each other. So I think it's important to know which one you are. And if you are collaborative, make sure you surround yourself by other collaborative leaders. And if you're visionary, remember, you probably are going to be at the top by yourself, getting people to implement your vision. Does that answer your question? What type of leader are you? Yeah, it's great to know. It's great to know. Yes.
How do you handle conflict situations?
How do I handle conflict situations? So with conflict situations, that's a pretty broad term, but one thing that I do is I slow things down to make sure I truly understand. Because normally when there's conflict, there's a lot of drama. And, two things with conflict. So first of all, can you just push all the drama away and just move to a solution? So it's like, look, there may be an opportunity before everybody goes into their story and everybody talks about why they're right and the other person's wrong. Sometimes you can bypass that by, look, can we just work on a solution? Sometimes that works. Sometimes that doesn't. But what I do when there's conflict is I listen a lot, because I really want to understand what the true issue is. Because normally what the issue first looks like isn't what the true issue is. Does it make sense? Is that helpful? Anything else? You got some good ones. Anything else?
Maybe later.
All right. I'll be here. Cool. What else do we got?
Delegating must be hard if you're a visionary leader, because you are the only one who has the full vision and you must delegate all of it.
Delegating is hard. Delegating is hard for everybody, especially if you're a visionary leader. You're absolutely right. And I'll give you a little bit on delegation, because this is what I learned. Normally what happens is we're overloaded, and so we're at 35? All right. Normally what happens with delegation is we have all this stuff, we're overloaded, and then we hire somebody, or somebody is assigned to us to take over, these duties. And so I'm so happy, I just dump all this crap on them. And then what happens is this person gets all this stuff dumped on them without proper training, without proper, whatever, and then they fail. And then what happens is I take it back. I'm like, I'm never going to delegate this again. So to me, delegation is an iterative process where whoever I'm delegating to, I want to have an implementation plan of implementing it. So I want to make sure that it's gradual, which is very rarely done. It's normally this all or nothing thing, which I think is the worst thing to delegate. And I like a lot of small check-ins. I know this is very tactical, but if I delegate something to Tony, I say, Tony, why don't you give me just a 1-minute call every day for the first 5 days, and then a 1-minute call like the next 2 Fridays, because then it's more proactive. What we often do is we say, hey, Tony, do this. If you run into problems, call me. Well, Tony wants to do a good job, so he's having a little bit of problems, but he doesn't call me. But if we have a 1-minute call, he'll be like, this isn't really a problem, but he'll bring up what his concern is, and then I can coach him through it. So it's much more of a coaching way to do it. Does that help? All right. Yes?
How do you start your day?
How do I start my day? This is interesting because my wife actually teaches yoga, nutrition and movement for women and empowerment for women, and we're all
Say 5 a.m. please.
5 a.m. I hate to say it, but the earlier the better. The earlier the better. And what's that?
Start to levitate at 5 a.m.
That's good. That's a good thing. I hope you mean meditation by levitation. But okay, that's even better. I need to learn that. I need to learn that. Look, the fact is, in the morning, nobody bugs you. And in the morning, you have your creative energy. I find that especially creative things where I really need my brain, I really need my focus, are best done in the mornings. And the older I get, the more stuff's pulling at my time, the more I go through the day. So my mornings are really my special time where I get my most important work done. Normally, I do get up at 5 or 5:30. I do some meditation. I sometimes do a little process, like a journaling process. And if I have to write or if I have to do anything creative, I do it before anybody else is up and before I have my first meal. So that's how I do my thing. Well, I go to bed early. I'm the most boring guy in the world. So I'm in bed hopefully by 10 or 11, which you guys are just eating dinner at 10 or 11 down here on the coast. I know. So I don't know. Just do your best you can. But the morning's the only time nobody can really steal from you. The later it gets, the later it gets.
Who are your role models? Richard Branson.
Who are my role models? That's a great question. And it's interesting because Steve Jobs has done amazing things, but he was a bit of a jerk. I mean, he's a real jerk in a lot of areas. And as far as role models, it's a good question. And I don't know if I have specific role models, as I try to take a little bit from each and every person. And that gets me a little bit out of this hero worship, which I think can be a bit dangerous. And some of the old, and I've been reading more and more about history. There's like Andrew Carnegie and some of the old time business people way back in the day are really fun to learn about. But I've been reading more and more biographies because I really like understand people's thought process. You know, if somebody, Steve Jobs' biography was good. There's a couple others about Uber and Netflix, and it's so interesting that how maybe they had a conversation early in the day, formed a meeting they had with an investor and informed what else they said. So it's so interesting to see how just real life goes into success, and how many of these companies a lot of it was at the right place and at the right time. And if you start a business, so much has to do with timing. So much has to do with timing. I mean, I read an in-depth book about Uber, and there was car sharing services before and after Uber. Uber just happened to hit it at the very right time. And if you remember, Uber didn't even look like what it looks like now. It was to get black cabs, the big expensive cabs. It wasn't even to get individual riders. So when you look at some of these companies, when you look at Google didn't know how it was going to make money for the first 5 or 10 years until somebody figured out promoted search, paid search. So it's really interesting to see how these small decisions can really make or break a company, whether it's from the leadership or the business point of view. Cool.
What do you recommend for motivation?
What do I?
Or do you recommend team building?
Team building and team motivation. Well, again, this is a whole nother topic, but you have to have a vision for your team and a purpose. So you have to have a vision of what you want your team to look like. Even if you have a programming team, even if you're a programming lead in front of 5 developers, you run a support department, you have to have what you want, this vision for this team. And you got to be able to communicate that to your team. Because if they don't know where they're going, they don't know how they're going to get there. And you have to have a purpose, like why. You have to have a why. And sometimes that can be difficult when you're in another organization. It can be difficult to have a why, especially maybe if it's not a great culture in the organization. But that can also differentiate you from the other leaders in the organization. So, because without a purpose and without a vision, nothing you can do is more than short-term motivation. And then motivation comes in money and titles, but those are hard to replicate. A guy named Daniel Pink, wrote Blink, and he found that people are motivated by autonomy, like being able to do their job, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose are what truly motivate people. So it's up to us as a leader to bring that there. Cool. One more. Anything else? Yes.
We have a couple of students here. What advice would you give to them before they start a career?
Huh. Yeah. What advice would I give students? If you want to be an entrepreneur, do you guys have entrepreneurial? Are you guys as students?
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to start do you think at some point in your life do you want to start a business?
Sure.
I think you have 2 choices to start a business. Either do it right now, like as you're leaving school, or wait 10 or 15 years until you learn an industry. Because if you do it now, you have no fear. You don't know what you don't know. If you fail, you sleep on your mom's couch. Or you wait 15 years to really understand an industry. Because to be honest, most of the people, I mean, it's a little different in the IT sector, but most of the people I know in the States that have a thriving business did it in their mid to late 30s or their 40s because they really understood an industry. Because you have to understand an existing industry to go into it. But if you're doing something in technology and in a newer industry, it's best to do it right out of school, because if you're 5 years in, you're going to have your rent payment, you're going to have your husband or your wife, you might have kids, then you have all these payments, and so you can't really take the risk. So you either want to take the risk right now or wait till you really, I think, have what it takes to do it. Does that make sense? Good. And Split needs more entrepreneurs, especially in technology. So we'll do whatever we can. Good. All right. We good? And I'll stick around afterwards. So if you have any one-on-one questions, I'm happy to.
Do you think Croatia has a good leaders, like in general, since you've been living here for the last couple of years, right?
Yeah, I think it's interesting with Croatia because the old system, when you want to call communism, socialism, whatever you want to call it, was not a leadership system. I mean, it was literally a system that revolved around corruption. I mean, that was the economy, right? It was on the black market. And so there was no reason for leadership because people were going to do the same job no matter what kind of leader you were or not. I mean, everybody got paid the same, right? And they were there. So the transition Croatia's going through is huge. It's as big as any country could ever go through, especially because you also been through a war 20, 25 years ago. So though what I'm really enthused about is people like you, Tony, people that come to places like this, because I do see, and I know it's the minority, maybe it's the 1 or 2 or 3% of Croatian people. Normally they're fairly young, normally they're under 40. They have this great energy and the great drive. And I think that outside of the system, I really look, and from a sort of psychology perspective and sociology perspective, Croatians can be very, very hard workers, very resourceful, very focused when they want to be, right? And I think, and very, great technical, great skillful people. And they stick together. They have a lot of good sense. So there's a lot of great things that the Croatian genealogy, in a way, brings. And I think it's just, and for me, and the other 97, 99%, there is a bit of negativity out there. There is a bit of laziness out there, which there is in a lot of countries, and it is here too. And I think that's why places like this meetup are so important because it is a risk-averse culture. And being a leader, you have to take risks as a leader. And part of that's why I really work on the relationship with yourself, because as a leader, you're going to take a lot of risks, and some are going to work out and some aren't. So you have to be that type of person that bounces back. You got to be like a goalie in soccer and football, right? If somebody scores on you, you got to stand right back up like you were before with that confidence. Being a leader is the same way. You got to take these risks, and you got to be that person that if it doesn't work, you show up strong the next day. And that's why we work on the relationship with ourselves, to give ourselves that self-esteem. And that's why meetups like this are so important, to surround yourself by other positive leaders. Because when you do get knocked down, call somebody that you met here, call Tony, put a thing out on the meetup, meet a couple people for beers, get that close group of people that will be the people that, when things don't go perfectly, you can talk about it. And they say, all right, well, that sucks, but what's going on next? What do you got? There's a thing in the U.S. where we celebrate failure, which isn't true. It's a bit in the startup community. We don't celebrate failure. But what does happen in the U.S. is if I do fail, I go out with my buddies for beers, and they say, all right, well, quit complaining. What are you going to do next? Don't stay in this negativity, which can happen here, right, with some friends and relatives and things. And that's why it's important to have your meetup, all these different groups to really promote the positivity and to promote the support, because that's going to be the thing that really, from an emotional and mental standpoint, is going to separate you from the people that don't have that. Yeah. Good. All right. Well, I'm tired of talking, so I think it's time for you guys to. You want to come up here and lead the thing? Oh, thank you.